I probably don't need to convince you that the book Atomic Habits is pretty awesome, just objectively. Fantastic book from page 1 to page 296, whatever it is. My favorite part of the book is the graphics. I love when people make like simple doodle graphics that explain big concepts. We're visual learners. It's just so cool when people can do that at a high level. And James Clear does it at the highest level. These doodles, graphs, graphics are amazing. And I wanted to make a video that goes through my 6 favorite. There's a bunch more, but these are the 6 biggest ones. Definitely buy the book if you haven't. Seems based on Amazon that literally everyone in the world has. But if you haven't, these 6 graphics are going to give you like the 80-20 of the book. So let's jump into my computer. I redid these graphics myself. I didn't know like if I'd get in trouble if I just took pictures of them. So these are the same. I just reimagined them. And these concepts aren't like unique necessarily to James Clear, so I'm sure he wouldn't have a problem with this. James, if you're watching, awesome. Hopefully you're not mad at me. But yeah, go grab a copy of the book if you haven't already. Let's jump into my computer. All right, y'all. I'm gonna cheat a little bit. I wrote a article on Medium that's going to be all the stuff I'm sharing with you here. Click the link down below in the description if you want to read it. We're gonna go through this just from here. I don't have time, y'all, to like do nonstop video editing. It takes so much time. You'll appreciate it. It's going to be the same value, I promise. All right, first, number 1, 1% better every day. The concept is pretty simple. I mean, it's straightforward. The problem is that things aren't exactly always objectively measurable, but the underlying concept is if you get better 1% every day, compounding, you're going to end up about, 37 times better at the end. Again, you can't exactly measure every single thing. Like if you get 1% nicer, right? You can't measure that. It's something you want to do, but you can't measure it. But the underlying, just the heuristic behind this is that continual slow improvement is going to make more exponential gains than we might think. Vice versa, a 1% decline every day might seem small at the moment, but over time it compounds as well and we end up way worse off. So that's just the general concept, 1% better every day. Small improvements over time consistently compound. Pretty straightforward, but very, very, very powerful. You know, this is kind of the whole point of habits. Small things make big changes over time. You don't notice them in the moment, but over time, it's almost impossible to not see them. Next, the valley of disappointment. This is essentially, there's a book called, I believe it's called The Gap. I think it's Seth Godin, or The Dip. It's called The Dip. And it's about that middle part of doing anything meaningful, like if you're building a business, that part where it gets boring, where you lose that initial passion and interest, and you kind of have to slug through it, where the results don't come as quickly as you want them to. That is the valley of disappointment. So we think that results are continual and linear. And again, this kind of goes back to the 1% better every day. Results are exponential, all things being equal. So we expect if we just do the work every day, we're going to keep getting that better result. When in reality, it's kind of a sloped curve, right? Where we don't see a massive return on the work up front. So there's that valley where we're like, man, I'm working harder than I'm gaining. I'm not getting the results that I want. But then at a point right here, once we get out of the valley of disappointment, we start to actually exceed the results that we were going for. Again, just like compound interest, you're investing $100 every week. In 10 years, it starts to compound at a rate that is way, way, way more powerful than you could ever have imagined for $100 a week, right? Similar thing. The value here of this is just understanding that getting through that valley and not giving up is where most of the value in what we do is. Most people give up here in this valley of disappointment. It's perfectly normal to do that. I've done it many times. We all do it, but the people who really succeed are the people that can get through that. There's another interesting concept called the winner's effect, or I like to call it learned hopefulness. We've heard of learned helplessness. Learned hopefulness and the winner's effect is essentially when you have early success It drives you forward because you have more confidence. You expect to do well. That way, when you go forward and you don't, you're not feeling like this is impossible. You have that evidence that you can do it. And a lot of times it's just luck. I got lucky when I started my business. The first thing I did kind of worked. And then it let me have more confidence when everything else wasn't working after, because it was just luck. Obviously, like I thought I knew. I was like, dude, I can't miss. I'm just going to do this every time. And then when things didn't work, I was like, that's a fluke, as opposed to seeing that the first one was a fluke. But in that process, I actually got to the point where I actually was starting to make good decisions and understanding what I was doing. And it gave me that confidence. So this is similar. If you can get through that valley of disappointment, that is where the real results end up. All right, moving right along. The 3 layers of behavioral change. So this is really the nucleus of the book. The biggest thing that I learned from this was the identity shift. Instead of thinking I'm quitting smoking, changing your identity to I don't smoke is going to lead to a greater likelihood that you actually don't. Because someone who is quitting smoking might fail, but someone who doesn't smoke doesn't smoke. Obviously, that's maybe an oversimplification, and it doesn't guarantee that you can't smoke ever again. It's hard to quit smoking. Literally, it triggered me to throw in a Zen here, which will take us to the next one in a second. Cue, craving, response, reward. But yeah, the 3 layers that cause any behavioral change. According to Clear, all 3 are required to create any sort of lasting change. Change in outcomes, so that is a change in the results that we're trying to achieve. A change in processes, which is the systems and habits we use to actually achieve our outcomes. So all habits rely on systems. So having a system to actually get the result is one of the core points of this whole book. You don't just do it by accident, you do it with deliberate systems, right? And a change in identity. That's what I was just talking about, how we view ourselves in the world around us. Identity shift is probably the most powerful of the 3. Language and self-talk play a huge role in shifting habits. So there is a psychological aspect behind all habit building, obviously, and the way that we view ourselves, as corny as it sounds, matters, right? So instead of saying I'm quitting X, say I don't do X. Identify as someone who doesn't do that, right? All right, cue, craving, response, reward, cycle. Like I said, when I just threw in my Zen, I was triggered by the cue of hearing myself talk about smoking. So I got the craving. My response, I threw it in. Upper decky, lip pillow, upper decky lip pillow. And I got the reward, these little dopamine surges filling up the dendrites in my brain. You know, that's the habit. That is the habit loop. It's how all habits work. Cue triggers a craving, which motivates a response that delivers a reward, and then that satisfies the craving. And then eventually the reward becomes associated with the cue. So here's another example that I made in the blog post. My alarm goes off. The craving is I want to feel awake and alert. And the response is I find and open and drink a 5-hour energy shot. Confession. So obviously I have a nicotine thing, but I think there's a good chance that I have had more 5-hour energy drinks than anyone on the planet. There's gonna be like 1 or 2 people that probably like did like 3 or 4 a day that might have beat me, but they're probably dead. But I've taken one every single day for whenever they came out. I started doing them when I was like 18. I don't know. Maybe it wasn't right when they came out. When I was 18, I got into them, and I've had one every single day ever since. If I just took that money and put it into a savings account, in a compounding interest account, oh my God. I'd be living on the moon, drinking moon juice with Zac Efron. Wouldn't be here doing videos. Just kidding. I would. I love doing these videos. All right, moving on. The book is riddled with examples, so you don't need my examples. Habit stacking. This is probably one of my favorites. It's essentially very, very straightforward. Some things are so straightforward, but you just need to hear them again. Because sometimes they resonate at that time. Like you hear and you're like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. But did you do it? You know what I mean? So sometimes that's what I like to hear, even things that are pretty straightforward. Like the book was full of tons of stuff that's pretty straightforward, but the way that he shares it is kind of eye opening. And when you appreciate it as such, right? When you're like, hey, this guy's really smart, these things that he's saying mean something, you can often, it can hit different. And so I like to reread good books as opposed to always trying to find like the next great book, especially on things like habit building, because those are kind of static. Like there's only so much new research that comes out. We kind of have a pretty good understanding of what works and what doesn't. Always new things coming out, but okay, so this is basically, cue, craving, response, reward, but then you tie it with something else. So when you brush your teeth, you put your Rogaine on when you're done. Did you know that, not to go off topic, you know that they're saying that like putting, because I use Rogaine, obviously. They're saying that if you use Rogaine and then you touch your pets like treats and give them a treat, like it could kill them. Anybody heard of this? I felt bad because that's what I do. It's actually it was part of my habit stack. I would brush my teeth. I'd put on my Rogaine. I would get the dog's medicine. My one dog has epilepsy, so I'd get her pills, give her pills. And now I'm like, oh my God, I've had Rogaine hands. They're fine. So I stopped doing it. But this is pretty straightforward, right? Stack the things that you're doing into one congruent habit so that you don't have to remember 4 or 5 different things. If you do them all at once, you knock them all out, and you only have to remember one time. Pretty straightforward. All right, and the last one, I love this one. It's another one of those things where you're like, oh, I know that, but I just had never like given it a name. Anyone who plays video games knows this method. It's called the Goldilocks rule, and it's essentially that we get the most fulfillment, and when we're most fulfilled, we keep going, right? Which is why it's important. This isn't just like, I feel good, I do the things that make me feel good. This is like, if you find the things that make you feel good, you're more likely to keep doing them, which is going to be more likely that you get the result. So one of the mistakes that we make is we're like, man, I have to do things at the highest difficulty. If I'm not doing it at the highest difficulty, I'm not pushing myself enough, right? So the example that I like, I play a game called MLB The Show. And in that game, they have different levels. They have rookie, and then they have legend. Legend is almost impossible. Like I would guess that I probably wouldn't get too many fewer hits against a real major league pitcher than I do in legend mode. It's just impossible. So it's actually not fun, right? So then I come down and I play on Hall of Fame mode. I can hit better there, but then I come down one more to All-Star. Super fun. I start hitting like a normal player. That's my Goldilocks zone. Is I'm not so good that I can play on legend. I would like to, but if I only played on legend, I would quit because that's not fun, right? So it's another reason why people. I have 4 kids, and people are like, well, you should have them, go a grade up, or in sports, they should play a year up so they get better. I don't really buy into that. Again, going back to like the winner's effect, I don't buy into that because I think if you're outside of that area where you can actually see success, you're more likely to quit. So yeah, all things being equal, you are getting better, but we have to look at the big picture, right? We're not robots where we can just go, I'm getting better. This is fine. It doesn't matter that I'm not doing anything well. It's a psychological thing. We're emotional creatures. So we need to actually be seeing results or we'll quit. So again, we're not robots. So we have to balance the psychological aspect of what's going to keep me going, just like with a diet, right? It's better to do a diet that's not perfect that you're actually going to stick to as opposed to one that's perfect, but you're going to quit because it sucks, right? It's too painful. So that's the Goldilocks zone. Guys, those are the 6 ones. If you want to read, not my ad-libbed explanations here, I do have this post over on Medium. Be sure to subscribe if you like videos like this and don't mind that I'm not doing a ton of editing. We're focusing on just the topics, guys. We're not doing all the crazy edits and stuff. I'm not Mr. Beast. If you want him, he's obviously out there. But yeah, be sure to subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video.